各位好，欢迎收看33高峰会，我是 Clarence 张梦华。在这岁末时刻呢，我们迎来了本年度的第12期节目，也是我们2024年的最后一期节目。这最后一期节目呢，也是尤为的特别，因为呢，这也是我们与新西兰的总理 Christopher Luxon 以及反对党领袖 Chris Hipkins 的最后一次专访。然而呢，因为 Hipkins 的工作繁忙，我们也只争取到了10几分钟的时间。但在某些问题上呢，我们仍然是想方设法让他们两个人来了一场隔空辩论。我也希望呢，今天的节目能够为这一年的政治观察画上一个圆满的句号。好的，话不多说，接下来就让两位政要与我们一同来回顾这不平凡的2024年，并且呢，展望充满可能的2025年吧。那前2期的节目中呢，我们与新西兰的移民部长以及反对党移民事务发言人进行了专访。而刚好在我们采访 Hipkins 之前呢，又看到了新西兰离境人数再创新低这样的新闻，所以呢，首先我们也是要问到 Hipkins 是如何看待现在新西兰人留不住人的消息的。
I think the challenge really is that under this government, record numbers of New Zealanders are leaving the country. And I think many are doing that because when you can't get work here in New Zealand, you move to where you can find that work. And I think that this government have a lot to answer for in that regard. So take building and construction, for example. There's about 13,000 fewer people working in building and construction now than there were a year ago. And much of that is down to this government's decision making. So what that means is those people who've got skills that are in hot demand around the world, they can jump on a plane, they can go and get a good, well-paid job somewhere else, which they can't currently get in New Zealand. And this government are responsible for that.
那么工党最近也举行了年会，我们也知道，像财富税这个话题也是登上了很多头条。那么在刚刚过去的这个年会上，工党有没有提出任何有关移民的话题呢？
We haven't set our immigration policy for the next election campaign yet. We'll do that over the next year or so. So by sort of early 2026, you should see our immigration policy for the next election. Obviously, a lot can happen over the course of a year, so the government could change their immigration policy quite a lot. And so we don't want to set out our immigration policy until we actually know what the current government's immigration stance is going to be.
那好吧，那我们就静静的等待吧。我得说，时间过得真的非常的快。你看，大选转眼间已经过去了1年了。那刚才 Hipkins 也说到了，新西兰人找不到工作就会润去其他的地方。现在呢，也有预测出来了，标普就说了，新西兰明年的失业率呢将飙升至2020年9月的水平，成为明年亚太地区失业率最高的国家。所以接下来，让我们来听听总理是如何看待这一预测的呢？
Well, I mean, the forecast, we're at 4.8% unemployment. I think the forecasts, have us hitting about 5.2% before it starts to come down. That's quite natural because when you've had high government spending that drove domestic inflation, that then put interest rates up, high interest rates put the economy into recession. And then when you've been in recession, the last thing you're left to deal with is you get rising unemployment. So those are the laws of economics that we are dealing with. And sadly, what has happened is that many businesses have had to deal with high inflation, high interest rates, suppressed demand for their products because they've been in a recession. And the last thing they want to do is lay off workers. But in some sad cases, that's what's been happening in the last, 3 to 6 months. So, we are fixing the economy. We've got, good discipline around the government spending. There's going to need to continue to be that's going to need to continue on, obviously. We've got inflation for the first time below 3%. It wasn't that long ago under the previous government. Inflation was running at 7.2% and food prices were increasing at 12%. If you think about it, we've now had 4 quarters, the first 4 quarters we've had as our government, where wages have actually been increasing faster than prices. So that actually means people can actually save and get ahead a little bit. You've now got inflation at 2.2%. You've got food inflation down at 1%, and you've actually seen stable rents. Rents have not gone up under our government at all by virtue of some of the changes we made around landlords. So, that's been a good situation because that just means New Zealanders are keeping more of their own money in their pocket rather than having just to keep dealing with high inflation. It just keeps going up year after year after year. And because inflation's back under control, the good news is we had 12 interest rate rises under Labor. You've had 3 interest rate cuts under National. And, we're going to continue to make sure we put downward pressure on interest rates. When that happens, that frees up people who would spend that money on their mortgage payments already just with the 3 cuts, the average mortgage holder has probably got about $180 extra a fortnight after tax to spend. They will spend that in the economy. They might spend that in a retail outlet or in going out for dinner in a food and beverage outfit. That helps the economy to grow. Likewise, if you're a business and you want to expand, interest rates are cheaper, so you've got more certainty with this government and confidence, and therefore you've got lower interest rates. It just means that you can borrow and actually grow your company very well as well. So, there's lots. That's what then leads to the economic growth. That's what then leads to unemployment coming down. What has been good to see is that business confidence is at a 10-year high. They know it's been tough, but as they look forward, they have confidence in the future as a business people. And then you see consumer confidence at a 3-year high. And so they know it's tough right now, but they can see the plan is working and they believe, that times are going to get better. And that's why we want to see a focus on growth and jobs next year. As we work our way through the economic effects of having to clean up a hell of a mess that was put in place after 6 years of a Labour government. And I think in 12 months, to have inflation down, to have interest rates down, to have crime coming down, to have made progress on education and the programs that we're putting in place, put more money into healthcare than ever before, and to have cancer drugs available like never before. It's a lot of progress in 12 months. And so we need to carry on and push on and continue that work.
确实啊，现在利率和通胀率都比之前呢降了不少了。但就在我们采访完总理不久呢，新西兰统计局又公布了第3季度的 GDP 数据，同比下降了1%。与第2季度的数据相连的话呢，就意味着新西兰是再一次的步入到了技术性衰退的轨道。诚如总理说到的，目前商家和消费者仍然保持着信心。然而，这份信心能在经济持续低迷的环境中持续多久呢？新政府上台之后，一大目标呢，就是要提高工作效率，重新确定支出优先级，来减少政府的开支。最近呢，新西兰政府将 Marsden 基金进行了重大的调整，直接取消了对于人文以及社会科学这些领域的资助，然后呢，将这些基金用于数理化这些具有重要的经济效益的领域。那这份政策一出呢，也是震惊了新西兰的学术界，不仅引来了大学的集体声讨，同时呢，也让一些受益者直言啊，实在是太恶心了。那么政府与反对党又是如何看待的呢？让我们来听听看。
Yeah, look, I mean, really what we want to focus our limited amount of investment on is things that advance our economic interests, things that advance, progress on the environment, things that advance progress in health. And when you've got, relatively limited, you're in a small country with limited funds, it's really important that you're very, very focused on that. And we think we can, by focusing the fund in a much stronger way, that can help us in an economic sense because we need more investment in research and development around our core sciences, physics, chemistry, biology. We need much more research around our environmental research projects that we have, as well as obviously health. So, I just think, we're making sure that everything we do is about high tech, it's about high productivity, it's about creating high value businesses, it's about growth. And therefore, putting a real focus back on things like physics and chemistry and maths and engineering and biomedical sciences is where we want that fund focused on.
I think it's a real step backwards. New Zealand should be investing in our creative sector and our arts and our humanities and social sciences. If you look at issues around health, for example, there's a huge amount of benefit that we get from some of our social science research in that area. And actually, if you look in areas that are economically productive to New Zealand, our creative sector is incredibly important to our productive sector. So I just think the government don't really appreciate the value of our creative sector and of our social sector, and I think that's a bad decision. We'll figure out what our policy on that will be closer to the next election, because obviously, as I've said, lots can change, but we're opposed to the change that they've made.
明着说吧，说不好听点的，那就是说现在的联合政府呢，认为再往人文以及社会科学这些领域去进行大量的投资呢是没有意义的，因为呢，他们不会给新西兰的经济复苏与发展带来任何的帮助。然而呢，我们也必须承认，新西兰的文化艺术和人文研究在塑造国家认同以及凝聚社会共识方面发挥着不可替代的作用。那么，对于两位政要来说，人文与社会科学对于新西兰究竟意味着什么？他们真的就不重要吗
We think they're important, and you'll see us through our social investment agency do a lot more work to make sure that we can work on some of our big intractable social challenges and problems that we have. But for this fund, we want to focus it very, very strongly on growth, and we want economic productivity. We want economic growth. We want to understand what's happening in our environment, and we want better health outcomes. And so, those are quite reasonable and quite legitimate things to do, to say, look, there's a danger that you just spend this money on lots of little things that really don't add up to make it to be a game changer, and we'd sooner have fewer, bigger, better things that are focused on our core agenda. We were elected to get this economy moving. Why do we want the economy to move? So that we can actually support our people better with actual public services like health and education and roading and infrastructure and policing.
Well, the economic contribution of the arts and of the creative sector to New Zealand are huge. I think maybe they should go and visit the film and television sector, and then they would see just how much benefit we're getting out of sectors that involve very, very creative people. I think to say that we don't want to be engaged in research and development in those fields is just very short-sighted. Gaming is a massive industry around the world, and it's drawing as much on our creative sector as it is on our tech sector.
那目前呢，政策刚刚公布，我们也看不到实质性的影响。但我想说的是呢，科学系统是一个非常复杂的系统，无论是人文科学还是数理化等自然科学，它们都是这个系统中不可或缺的一部分，相辅相成，共同推动着对于社会的进步与发展。然而呢，当政策对这个系统的某一个领域进行单方面的削减的时候，会带来怎样的后果呢？那我们就可以持续关注下去了。好的，那讲完了最近我们关注的国内议题之后呢，我们先休息一下，待会儿回来呢，我们来聊聊国际上的事儿，同时呢，让两位政要与我们一同回顾2024，展望2025。欢迎回来，您现在收看到的是33高峰会，我是张梦华。那在今天节目的下半期呢，让我们首先放眼世界。在上个月举行的 APEC 峰会期间呢，新西兰总理 Christopher Luxon 终于与中国国家主席习近平举行了首次会晤。从一些画面上来看呢 ，Luxon 似乎还是挺愉快的，所以我也是首先问到他与中国国家的领导人首次见面都聊了些什么。
Yeah, look, I mean, it was another good meeting. I mean, we had Premier Lee here in New Zealand, a very successful visit. We then followed it up with a one-on-one with President Xi, which was really good. We talked about the fact we've got a long-standing relationship over 50 years. We think we want that to be a strong relationship. We want it to be one where there's still huge opportunity in the trade space, particularly in the people-to-people links with education and tourism, but also particularly a lot of collaboration that we should be continuing to advance around climate change, around renewable energy, all of those good things as well. So, it was a good chance to catch up. We actually also spoke informally around some of the dinners that we were at as well, just one-on-one as well. So, no, look, I really enjoyed it, and he very kindly invited me to Beijing next year to bring a formal delegation as well, which will be good for us to just make sure that everybody still understands the huge opportunity that China and the China-New Zealand relationship represents.
既然说到习近平已经邀请 Luxon 访华，我也是想问问他自己，打算什么时候去呢？
That'll be worked through between his schedule and my schedule, but I mean, it should hopefully be in the first half of this year, of next year. I imagine probably in Q2, somewhere in there. I have a trip to India planned in Q1 and some other trips, and then and with President Xi's big schedule as well, our teams will work that through and we'll announce that close to the time. But at the moment, we're targeting Q2 as the window for us to get together.
好的，那我们就静静的等待官宣吧。那他刚刚呢也说到了印度，所以我也是想问问他有关印度的问题。毕竟呢，他上台之前就说了，说当上总理的第1年就要去到印度。然而结果是呢，现在可能真的是要处理国内的这些烂摊子吧。但是呢，贸易部长以及外交部长呢与印度的联系次数还是蛮多的啊，可就是没有什么实质性的进展。所以呢，我也是问到总理，目前和印度方面的外交与贸易的重点到底在哪？ 还想着签订自由贸易协定吗？
Look, I mean, the way to think about it is with India is our focus this year has been about building a relationship because, to be honest, New Zealand didn't have a very deep relationship with India for a number of reasons, but particularly over the last 6 years, it just wasn't a priority for the previous government. As you know, this year, India has overtaken China as the most populous country on earth, and by the end of the decade will be this be the third largest economy by 2030 in the world. And so if you think about, we do almost, I think, $38 to $40 billion worth of trade with China, but we do about $2 billion worth of trade with India. And so when you are a small 5 million people trading nation that wants to go out in the world and sell our products and services to Chinese, to Japanese, to Koreans, to Singaporeans, to Indonesians, and also to India. We want to trade with as many people as possible. And so, but our primary focus has been on building a relationship. And so our trade ministers have met 6 times. Our foreign affairs ministers have met several times, as well as obviously our defence ministers. I've met and hosted President Murmu here in Wellington in New Zealand. I've also spoken with Prime Minister Modi on the phone, and we also had a very good catch up in Laos and had some one-on-one time as well. So so that's and then he's very kindly invited me with a delegation to India next year as well. So it's really about saying, look, we are a country that actually doesn't get rich by just selling stuff to each other inside of New Zealand. We are a trading country, and therefore that's why we want to have good international rules-based system. That's why we want to have freedom of navigation. That's why we respect nation states. All those values that we have as a small trading nation, it's very important for us to build trade everywhere. So because why? Because 1/4 of all of our jobs are actually tied to trade internationally, and the companies that export around the world actually are able to pay their employees higher wages and salaries. And so that's why trading and doubling the value of our trade in the next 10 years is a very ambitious goal, but a very good one to be striving for.
确实，那印度在人口红利上面超过中国已经是不可否认的事实了。现在呢，也越来越多的报道呢都在说，印度呢就是新的中国呼吁新西兰转移战略的重心，从中国直接转移到印度等等。但印度真的会在未来追上并超越中国吗？甚至呢，有研究院就表示说，现在的印度就是09年的中国。所以按照这个速度来说的话，印度是不是会在2039年达到中国今天的样子呢？那您觉得印度在2039年的时候会与新西兰有380亿纽币的贸易额吗？我个人还是真的有一点点不信的。要知道，印度自身的贸易保护主义也是特别重的，尤其是像针对乳制品这样的行业。这个可以说是新西兰的支柱性的出口行业，那真的可以进入到印度的市场吗？
Well, look, I mean, we'll work our way through that, when we talk more deeply about trade arrangements between India and New Zealand. But, what's been fantastic is our dairy industry is going from strength to strength. You would have seen just this week, the payout price lifted up to $10. And I was down in Southland, New Zealand, at the bottom of the South Island. And, there was really, great momentum amongst our dairy folk in particular. And what we've done very well is that we don't do just commoditized products. We actually have value-added products that we actually now sell out to the world. So, a good example for me was I was in Korea, I think, and, Fonterra have managed to create a whipping cream that is at ambient temperature, not at chilled temperature, and is being used by bakers all across Korea for their baking goods. So, there's an example where you create added value to the dairy and to milk, and you end up actually getting more premium prices for it with higher margins, which supports higher standard of living or higher wages and salaries back here at home. So, there's lots of opportunities to think about with respect to how we move dairy forward when it often is, quite a difficult sector to navigate because there are often, less efficient farmers in other countries around the world that it becomes quite, difficult. But having said all of that, we're proving that if we make great products and we add value to them and we have science, technology, and innovation at work, and that is the history of the agriculture sector in New Zealand, that we can do very well. I mean, we've grown our trade in the US up over 30% this year. We'll continue to do well in China and Japan, Korea, throughout Southeast Asia. So, we've got a lot more to do. We want to see some more innovation in wool in particular. We want to see more innovation in forestry and more value add so we can get those higher products and higher prices.
可以说这个回答也是总理的标志性回答。先说那到时候我们再看吧。然后呢，把话题转移到新西兰乳制品的竞争力是如何强劲等这些自己擅长回答的领域。那我们就只能拭目以待了，看看政府到时候到底要怎么才能打开印度的大门吧。还有一个国际问题呢，上一次我采访总理的时候呢，没有问到，那就是美国的大选。在美国大选结束之后呢，总理和特朗普也是打了电话。那么他们聊了什么？以及新西兰政府将如何应对一旦被美国加征了关税之后的影响呢？
Yeah, look, I mean, again, we've got another long-standing relationship with the US as well. I had a good, 15-minute chat, 20-minute chat with President Trump as well. We need to let them get into power. That won't happen till January the 20th, and we'll see, how people have talked about tariffs and their trade policy and how all that shakes down and the implications for New Zealand. Let's wait and see actually what happens once they get to government. But regardless of that, New Zealand doesn't have a free trade agreement with America, and actually our trade with the US has gone from strength to strength, particularly in the last year. It's been fantastic. So we talked about continuing to make sure that we've got good relationship at a people-to-people level between our two countries. They have good businesses, particularly in the technology space, that are doing really well in America. If you think about companies like Rocket Lab, for example, think about there's a number of organizations and tech companies or innovation companies that have been formed often in collaboration with US investors as well. So there's just a lot of opportunity for us still. In New Zealand, we don't need much of these big markets like China, like the US, like India, like Southeast Asia, like the Middle East, the GCC or the UAE, where we can actually get, we don't need that much to make our sector work back here at home very well. So it's about good targeting in those markets, understanding your customers well, and having good partners to continue to build out trade with.
好吧，那我们就耐心的等待吧，看看明年特朗普上台之后，到底会给这个世界带来什么样的影响，以及这个世界又将如何的应对呢？说了这么多的国际问题，今年工党可谓是一直在批评政府的外交政策，甚至呢，现在对于2026年的大选，其他政策还不清楚的时候呢，有一条已经知道了，那就是工党承诺不会加入到 Aukus 里边。所以呢 ，Hipkins 是如何看待现在政府的这些外交政策的呢？
Oh, I think it's important that New Zealand makes its own decisions around foreign policy, that we decide what's in New Zealand's best interests, that our best interests are determined here in New Zealand, not in any other country. So, we shouldn't be dictated to by Washington, D.C. or by Beijing or by Canberra or by London. We should actually make the decisions that are in the best interests of New Zealand.
那在上一次采访总理的时候呢，我们有一个非常重要的话题，就是这个反外国干预法。有声音说呢，这就是针对中国的法律。当然了，总理也否认了。那么，作为反对党的领袖 ，Hipkins 又是如何看待这条法律的呢？
Well, we do think that good law and regulation to prevent foreign interference in New Zealand is important. We'll see what the detail of the government's proposals are here before forming a final view on them. But we do think it's important that New Zealand remains independent and that we have effective measures to stop foreign interference in New Zealand. I think it's important that New Zealand can make decisions in the best interest of New Zealand. And it isn't, I don't think, singling one country out to say that we know that foreign interference has been increasing. There are a number of countries around the world where we're seeing, much greater foreign interference. And so I think it's important for New Zealand's independence that we have got a good way of dealing with that.
问完了国内国际的问题呢，我们接下来呢要问一问两位政坛领袖今年的个人回顾了。首先我得说啊，从总理自己公布了 Spotify 年度榜单来看啊，让我没有想到的是，总理竟然还是个 Post Malone 以及 Dua Lipa 的粉丝，这一点让很多新西兰人也是直接震惊。不是，哥们儿，你怎么还听这种匪帮说唱的这种风格的音乐呢？
What's that?
Yeah, well, I love country music, but actually Chris Stapleton is a great country singer, and he did a collaboration with Dua Lipa on a song I think called "Think I'm in Love with You," and they did a brilliant duet, and I love Post Malone, and Post Malone went and partnered with some country music singers as well recently as well. And my best TV show that I've enjoyed the most this year when I've been able to watch little bits has been Day of the Jackal on TVNZ, which has been really good too. So yeah, that's on a personal level, but in the job sense, I'm really pleased that our coalition government is using the talents of all the ministers. I'm very proud of our national ministers, but also of the minor parties and their contributions elections as well. I think, Nicola and I have worked incredibly hard on getting the economy. We're dealing with a very difficult set of circumstances around government spending and having to clean up a mess there. And we're starting to see some progress, but we've got some turbulence still to go through, but it's getting better. And then I think finally, we re-established that New Zealand is open for business and we're out and about and we're engaged in the world. And that's good for New Zealand's security interests. It's good for New Zealand's economic interests and our national interests as a result.
听完了总理的音乐品味和年度回顾，那再让我们看一看工党党魁 Chris Hipkins 对于这一年从总理到反对党领袖，他经历了怎样的心路历程呢？
I've had a very positive year overall. I wasn't necessarily expecting that because when you lose an election, you sort of expect things might be a bit tough for a little while. But actually, I've been really encouraged by the public reception that I've received. People have been very encouraging and very supportive of me and of the Labor Party. Our public support is starting to recover again after losing the last election. And I've had the opportunity to be out and about around the country an awful lot more this year, just seeing really the very best of what New Zealand has to offer.
那么对于总理和反对党的领袖来说，今年最大的挑战又是什么？以及对于明年又有着怎样的期许呢？
Oh, look, I think the biggest challenges have been just trying to work your way through a very difficult set of economic circumstances, and they are hard decisions to make. You have to make some very tough decisions about government spending because you know that impacts inflation and therefore interest rates and therefore the recession and therefore unemployment. And I think we've made, we've got those big rocks, and big decisions right. And we've found the balance of actually giving people tax relief, this year for lower middle income workers. We've given them inflation and interest rate relief, which is helpful. We've been able to support them with family boost, subsidies for childcare. And if you haven't got it and you got childcare costs, get on the My IRD site and actually get what you're entitled to, which could be up to $975 a quarter. And some of the working for family credit increases that we've had as well. So, I mean, I'm proud of the way we've been able to support people through the cost of living, making sure we can make more cancer drugs available as well was a big highlight for me. But yeah, dealing with the economic challenges is difficult. And then my hope for next year is that, we really want to see the economy start to grow because that's what supports our shopkeepers, that's what supports our cafes, all of those things that we want to see happening. So, and after 3 years of the economy continuing to shrink, we want to be able to see it grow in 2025. So, but there's a lot more to do. We'll keep working in the same way with quarterly action plans and just good clarity about what we're driving to achieve to make sure that we're rebuilding the economy, restoring law and order, delivering better health and education.
I think our biggest challenge was also our biggest success, which is that we wanted to use this year to get out and about and reconnect with the community. We know we lost the last election. We know that we need to win back quite a bit of support in order to win the next election. And I think we've done a good job this year of just being out on the ground, meeting people, listening to them and hearing their concerns and hearing their hopes and aspirations for the future. So that's been both our biggest challenge, but also I think our biggest success that we've been able to do that. Obviously, I'd love to see Labor's support continue to grow. That's what we'll be working very hard to achieve. I hope the economy starts to improve. I'm not optimistic about that because the current government's decisions, I think, are taking us in the wrong direction. But I hope we'll see New Zealanders get back to work next year with new jobs being created and good, well-paying jobs being created.
既然工党说到了要与民众重新连接，那么在他们接触与走访的过程中，发现新西兰人现在最关心的问题又是什么呢？
Our cost of living is still completely at the top of the list for the Kiwis that I speak to. It's a really, really tough time for Kiwi families at the moment. They're struggling to pay their bills, and some of those bills are still going up. The inflation might have come down, but the bills are still going up. Power prices still going up. Transport costs still going up. Rates are going up. Insurance is going up, and they're not really seeing much help with any of those issues. So it's a pretty tricky time for Kiwis at the moment.
我们都知道，政府一直在说现在的烂摊子都是工党执政时期留下的，那各种批评。那么反对党是如何评价政府第一年的表现的呢？
I think it's been a very poor start for the new government. They've made things worse for New Zealanders. Cost of living issues are still getting worse for a lot of New Zealand families, and tens of thousands of New Zealand families have found someone has lost their jobs in their families, and the economic policies of this government are the reason for that.
上一次我们采访移民部长的时候呢 ，Erica Stanford 就直接说了啊，说工党政府执政时期干的一件好事儿，那就是推出了保护移民免受剥削的这个 MEPV 的签证。也就是说你也不是干的所有的东西都是很差的嘛，这个意思。那么工党有没有觉得政府今年哪怕有一件事儿是做得比较好的呢？
Well, I struggle to find it. I'm naturally an optimistic person, and I try and look for successes, but the current government's successes are few and far between, unfortunately.
行吧，真的是一点面子都不给。那么对于工党来说，明年的工作重点又会是什么呢？
Main priorities for us are to make sure we continue with our work to rebuild the party and to get ready for the next election. You'll see some new policies from us next year, and then we'll be match fit in time for 2026.
最后我们要说的一点呢是，行动党党魁 David Seymour 呢，明年将会在5月底担任新西兰的副总理。那今年的一个条约原则法案呢，已经把新西兰搅的是天翻地覆。那两位政要对明年 Seymour 当上副总理之后又有怎样的期待呢？
Well, I mean, I expect David to do it for the country ahead of party, as Winston has done as well. And, I have good relationships with both those leaders. In New Zealand, the deputy prime ministership role is really for when the prime minister is out of the country, you become the acting prime minister. That's where it's important. But, frankly, I work well with, David and Winston and myself, and we don't always agree on everything, but, we are clear about how we work together. Which I think is a positive thing.
I think David Seymour will try and lead the government in a far more radical direction. And I think, unfortunately, because of the weakness of the leadership that we've seen from Christopher Luxon, that could be very bad for New Zealand. So I certainly hope that Christopher Luxon over the summer holidays will reflect on the extent to which he's allowed his government's agenda to be dictated by David Seymour and Winston Peters, and come back with a little bit more energy to actually continue to pursue policies that are in the best interests of the whole of the country, not just niche issues that New Zealand First and ACT seem to want to dictate.
好了，那吵了1年了，到这儿也就差不多该告一段落了。那在节目的最后呢，我们也让双方为大家送上了圣诞与新年的祝福。
Look, can I just say to the Chinese community that's listening and watching, thank you for the great contribution you make to New Zealand. New Zealand is a much better place because we've got a rich, diverse, passionate, strong, vibrant Chinese community, and you've made New Zealand so much better, and so we're very grateful for your contributions. I know it's been a difficult year for so many New Zealanders, but I know that New Zealanders can see that we have a plan and that is starting to work. And I just want everyone to be able to take some time out over Christmas to stop and to reflect, to refresh and to recharge, to make lots of new memories with your loved ones and family members, and then come back ready to go for what will be a very big 2025 as we continue to do the job that we need to turn New Zealand around and to realise all the great potential that we have in this awesome country of ours.
Daja hao, daiga hao, kia ora, and a very Merry Christmas to our Chinese communities. It's been a huge year, and certainly businesses and families have had to navigate some hard times. I want to thank you all for remaining resilient throughout this year and warmly welcoming me to so many different celebrations and events within your community. A lot has changed, and one concern that's raised often by our Chinese community is how much time this government has spent getting closer to the US. As I announced recently, our country has a fiercely independent foreign policy, and a government I lead will not join Pillars 1 or 2 of AUKUS. Our Labour government worked hard to maintain close relationships with both China and the US. That included, of course, New Zealand's largest delegation to China, which I led as Prime Minister. I hope you get some well-earned rest, connect with your loved ones, and we'll see you in the new year. Xie xie, duo jie.
好的，以上就是我们33高峰会这一期以及这一年的全部内容了。不过节目的最后呢，我还是有一个小彩蛋要送给大家。
All right, cool. Thank you very much, Prime Minister. Obviously, you did more interviews with us than Jack Tang. Sorry, and so really proud of that.
没错啊，总理今年因为种种原因多次拒绝参加 One News Q&A 的节目的采访，还让主持人 Jack Tang 呢发文吐槽说，自从大选之后啊，你就再也没有接受过我们的采访了。虽然吧，最后总理也是终于破例接受了一次正儿八经的采访，但这一年他们专访的这个次数和我们的33高峰会相比起来，简直不在一个量级。 好了，那开个玩笑，当然也是真的非常的自豪。那过去的一年呢，33高峰会始终也是致力于为华社呈现新西兰政坛最权威也是最具有深度的声音，让您透过执政党与在野党的不同视角，全方位了解我们这个小国家上面的重大议题，也希望对您的生活有所帮助。同时呢，借此机会，我也要在这里感谢为33高峰会这个节目付出努力的台前幕后的小伙伴们。我知道这个节目真的是非常的复杂，真的是谢谢大家把它搬到了荧幕上，也感谢电视机前以及我们 YouTube 上观看的朋友们。祝大家圣诞愉快，新年愉快！我是张梦华，我们明年再见。